So I get it that, like, at the end of the day, we're all pretty tired and burnt out. And so I really appreciate you being here today. Um, Not only are you probably burnt out, but your kids are burnt out also. It's been a long day for everybody. And I know the anticipation of Halloween coming up has the kids a little excited and wired. So I'm sure you're dealing with some extra behaviors around that. But I'll start by just jumping into some questions that I got pre submitted and answering those. So the first one I have is my child has 5 meltdowns a day. It could be over simple things. How do I stop these? Okay. So, first, let me start by saying tantrums are a developmentally appropriate stage for children to go through. So, you're not going to just stop all tantrums. Um, but what we want to look at is lessening the duration, the intensity, and how often they're happening, how frequently they happen. So, if your child is tantruming, like this person saying 5 times a day, that's a lot, right? That's a lot of meltdowns to deal with in the day. There's no indication here of how long they are or how intense they are, but 5 times a day is enough to handle. And obviously, if that's happening, something's going on. So the first thing I always ask parents to do is look at the why behind the behavior. So, this really requires us to pause and evaluate what's going on with our child and what's causing it. So, we want to really look at a few major areas that I would say. We want to look at are there sensory triggers? So, is my child activated more often when there's loud noises around or certain noises around, or if there's some overstimulation, there's a hectic environment? Or is it often when I have to put certain clothes on or shoes and socks on that might not feel right to my body? Um, so, those are the things I want you to look at when we're talking about sensory triggers. We also want to look at is it being caused because our child has a low frustration tolerance? Now, children in general have low frustration tolerances. That is just how they are developing. Um, but when we talk about a low frustration tolerance, maybe it's so low that we are seeing age inappropriate behaviors, tantruming longer, more often. And so, if frustration tolerance is that, then we need to help our children build the skills for dealing with frustrations a little bit at a time. The other thing I ask that you look at is are there communication gaps? Either the way I'm as the child, meaning like the child's understanding how you're communicating to you. So let's say as the parent, you tell the child to do something, and there's this gap that even though you've given them clear directions, they don't really understand what's going on or what you mean by it. So that would be one thing. Or is there an expressive language communication gap? And what that means is, do I know as the child what I want to say? And I'm having a lot of trouble forming those words and getting it out to you in a coherent way, in a way that you understand and the way that makes sense. Another reason behind tantrums or another trigger to look at is just physical needs that need to be met. Being tired, being hungry, being thirsty, those needs, if that's the underlying cause, must be met first, right? So we want to make sure we're feeding and watering our children, right? That is going to help them to maintain a certain level of regulation in general and that they're getting adequate sleep. Um, Are there some environmental factors going on? So, what I mean by that is, are transitions difficult for our child? Or is our routine disrupted? Or are we seeing lots of conflict within our environment, right? So, that might look like the parents are fighting often, and now you're seeing more meltdowns with your child. All of that affects them. So that could be a why. And then the last two are social factors and emotional factors. So, social factors, we want to look at, is this trouble with engagement with others? Or is it trouble with me just managing my emotions, right? Like, I have big feelings, which is definitely age appropriate, and now I don't know how to manage those. So when your child's having these 5 meltdowns a day, we want to kind of identify, out of those triggers and factors, what's really going on, what's the why behind the behavior, so that we can specifically address that. The other thing we want to do is pause and notice how we, as the parent, are feeling when our child starts to have a meltdown or tantrum. Obviously, a lot of feelings come up with ourselves. Then we want to respond to the type of tantrum it is, which in this case, you would look at all those factors that I named and be able to identify that, help them name their feelings. And then afterwards, right, we're not going to be perfect. So afterwards, we want to reflect on what happened. How did we do? How did we help them manage their tantrum? What's still going on with them? And over time, are we seeing some improvements or not? And then how do we reconnect with them after everything has calmed down? And during that time of reconnection, you can do some problem solving with them. I would not suggest problem solving when they are in the middle of a tantrum, right? At that point, they are in their downstairs brain. They've totally flipped their lid. And they're thinking with their just emotional brain, not their thinking brain. So all these steps are actually right in my tantrum response roadmap that I have on my website, which is free, and I will link it here in the comments. So if you want to go in, oops, that is not it. I apologize. I linked the wrong thing in the comments. So let me go copy this real quick for you guys. If you could just give me, 1 minute to copy. Let's see. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. But now that is right there in your comment section. So you could just click on that, or you could go to my website, abrighterfuturecounseling.com/newsletter, and get the free resource there. So I hope that was helpful. All right. The next question I have are, my 2 children fight constantly. How do I keep them from this? I get that. So the noise of them fighting is exhausting, right? We really are acting like a referee to them all day long, and that can be very draining and exhausting. So what we want to do is we want to separate, is this a skill deficit that we need to focus on? Or are we having feelings that are coming up and we need to address those? So, for example, I'll give you an example. I've worked with plenty of children who have lots of sibling rivalry stuff. And when things come up, such as the child says, maybe it's the older child about a younger child, like, oh, I wish they were never here. I hate them, right? A lot of the time, the initial reaction of parents is, oh, don't say that. Why would you say that? But in these moments, we need to validate that our child's feelings are what they are feeling, right? And so the more we push away from that, the more we try to not have them feel that way, the more they kind of grasp on because we're not understanding their feelings, right? So we want to empathize. It's really hard being the big brother or big sister, right? You're really mad that you don't have X, Y, and Z, time with mom, or whatever it is, right? So we want to empathize with them. We want to have them feel understood and heard by us. And we also want to look at how we contribute to that. So we don't want to compare our children. Oh, well, your younger sister does this so much better, right? That is only feeding into the jealousy or this feelings that I'm ignored now, right? We want to make sure we're not increasing those comparisons. Another thing when we talk about skills is we want to pause just for a minute before we jump in. And when we do jump in, we want to help them problem solve through it. So let's say your kids are fighting over a toy. Little Johnny has the toy and Rebecca really wants it. And so Rebecca grabs the toy out of his hands. And they don't have to be young children, right? They could be 8, 9, 10, right? And then Johnny starts fighting with Rebecca that the toy was taken out of his hands. So we want to pause them in the moment of this and narrate what's happening for them. So we might say something like, oh, Johnny, you're really upset because you were playing with this toy. And Rebecca, you really wanted this toy, so you took it, right? So we're just narrating it. Then we can move on coaching them on problem solving. So, this is a hard situation. I bet you two can think of a solution. Now, if they're younger, you might want to help them through that and think with them of a solution. So I hope that answers the question. I think if we are helping them build those skills of communication with each other, we're also teaching them that, there's going to be instances where you don't necessarily get to pick who you're with or who you're getting along with, and you have to learn to communicate. Okay. The next question I have is, why does my child only act out with me, not at school or not with others? Okay, this is a great question, and I actually really love getting asked this question. So your child's nervous system feels safest when it's with you, the parent. So that really should be a great thing. It doesn't feel great in the moment, right? But you're the one that they come to fall apart because they've held it together all day. They've been using their thinking brain all day. And then they have all these bottled up feelings. So once they get home in their safe zone with their safe person, the floodgates open, right? So the first thing I want you to do is reframe this idea that they're disrespectful for you or bad for you or, whatever the thought is, as they have trust and safety in you. And if it is times when it's after school, typically that's what's happening, right? They've held it together all day for school. then I want you to start working on creating gentle transitions for your child. So that might look like right away we have a snack, we have quiet time, we have a movement break. Those are the three things we're always doing after school so that we can become more regulated and really release some of those emotions. Um, I do have on my website an after school calm down routine in my free resources. So I'm going to link that here now. And you could go there and grab that free resource, post it on the refrigerator, kind of use it as a reminder for both you and your child of, oh, we get home, we have our snack, we have our quiet time, we do our movement. And then just my other thing that I would say about that is make sure you're co-regulating before correcting them. So instead of just jumping in and, correcting their behavior, understanding that this behavior is probably kind of an emotional release for them. They've been bottling it up all day, and I'm going to look at it differently and reframe how I see it so that then I can help co-regulate them. Okay, so the next question I have here is, how do I tell the difference between a tantrum and manipulation? I love that. What a great question. So a tantrum is typically a flood of emotions, like an overflow of emotions. It really stems from our lower brain, so our amygdala, that has just taken over. We are not thinking clearly when we are in a tantrum. Manipulation, on the other hand, is really an upper brain activity. We need to plan to manipulate. And so that is actually a skill that most children don't have yet, because it takes a lot of upstairs brain activity to manipulate. So when our child is in meltdown mode, we can't use upstairs brain activities like strategizing or planning, thinking things through. Okay, and they can't use those. So if you're seeing like the crying, the collapse, the fall on the ground screaming, typically that's not manipulation, that's dysregulation. If what you're seeing is them calm and testing limits, that could be boundary pushing. And so I would urge you to think of it that way, as pushing the boundaries. And then we need to set limits to those boundaries. But in either case of those, we want to stay regulated ourselves, we want to stay firm, and we want to stay connected with them. All right. How do I stay calm when my child is losing it? All right. So that's a great question. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Okay. It is human to get triggered. We have a lot as parents on our plates. And we have to understand that if we aren't taking the time to take care of ourselves and regulate ourselves, then we are more easily going to be triggered by our children's behavior. When we're triggered by our children's behavior, then our nervous system's going to get hijacked. That's kind of just natural, right? Like if I see a dysregulated nervous system, I myself am going to become dysregulated. there's actually, this is a little tangent, but I'll let you know, right? There is actually great evolutionary reasons why this happens. So if we think about it, back when we had to survive, right? If our baby was crying, if they were making noises that activated us, right? Oh, is there danger around? Is there something going to attack, right? I have to then move up in my regulation so that I can act and act quickly. And so naturally, our nervous systems mirror each other, where if my child's becoming dysregulated, I become activated and just start that regulation. Here's what we want to do. We want to notice the moment that this is happening in our body. We want to ground ourselves in the moment, say to ourselves, this isn't an emergency. I'm okay, right? We might pause and take a deep breath, use a sticky note to say, like, stay calm. Use some self-talk, like, this moment is hard and I recognize that and I could get through this, right? So all these things that we do to pause are going to help us stay calm in the moment, because what we want to do is regulate ourselves, not right, like, calm isn't always possible, but regulate it. We want to bring ourselves into regulation. So whatever that takes, that might take sticky note reminders around the house where your child most often has their tantrums. That might take stepping away for a minute while you regulate yourself before coming back and dealing with it. But in those moments, having some tools. But when we take a step back outside of those moments, making sure that we are not pouring from our empty cup. So that means self-care. What do we need to do each day, each week, each month to take care of ourselves, to become more regulated and more able to take that pause? So, all right, the next question I have here is, how can I connect with my child when they push me away? Oof, that is so hard, right? So that disconnection really hurts. What it feels like a rejection, even if it is coming from your child. So even just recognizing that, especially when you're trying so hard, right? So what I would say is, when kids feel either like shame or fear, they move right into their defense system, right? Their protection mode, the flight, fight, flight, freeze, right? And in some kids, that protection mode has them pushing away from others. This isn't rejection, right? It feels like it as the individual outside of it, and so we need to remind ourselves that that's not what is happening. That what is happening is they are in protection mode. So in these moments, we want to not chase them around, but stay steady, right? We might say something like, I'm here with you. We want to do maybe small gestures, right? They don't want huge hugs and them sitting on our laps and us rocking them, right? They might want a gentle touch, or us sitting by them, not saying anything, or a cold glass of water that we could get for them. We might name that to them out loud, right? During these moments, I say the fewer words, the better, but we might want to be clear about what's happening and say something like, it's really hard to be close right now. I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to leave you. Okay. And then we want to, if it was something that we then ruptured our relationship with. We want to repair that because that consistency builds trust when we're able to have that rupture repair dance. Okay. Why do I feel guilty after yelling, and how do I break that cycle? Yeah, every parent's been there, right? The guilt means that you care. Um, and what I would say is that shame of yelling keeps us stuck in that moment. So, yelling is often happening from our own stress response. Our amygdala is firing before thinking things through, and um, we start yelling, right? So, some practical steps you could take are something like pause and repair right after we were yelling. Say something like, I was feeling overwhelmed. I'm sorry I yelled. That wasn't about you. Reflect and don't shame them, right? Don't shame them or don't shame yourself, right? You can ask yourself what was going on right before you lost it, right? What were you feeling? Reset some expectations. We aren't looking for a perfect connection with our children all the time. Perfection is actually not what we want to see. I just talked about this recently in one of my other YouTube videos that you could hop on. I think it was named something like the perfect parent myth or something like that. So hop on there and look at that. Perfect parenting doesn't exist. So if that's what we're saying to ourselves, like I yelled and now I'm the worst parent ever, right? Well, we're not looking for perfection. Ruptures and repair, that cycle of rupture, repair, that's actually very important for children to see because they are then learning that people can make a mistake and make it better. That I can trust my adult, my parent, to come back to me after a rupture has happened, right? And then they're learning that skill themselves. And the last thing I would say is lend yourself a little self compassion. This is something as parents we all need to practice, especially when we feel that parent guilt coming up. And maybe just putting your hand on your heart, saying something like, this is a hard moment and I'm doing the best I can right now. Right. So, those are some important tips. Okay. The next question. Again, you could pop any other questions you have in the chat while you're on here. So, how do I get my child to listen without yelling or punishing? Okay. How do I get my child to listen without yelling or punishing? So, I know when I get this question often, I've tried everything and nothing works, right? Um, and I get that. So, kids want to do well, I would say, right? There is lots of research out there showing that kids want to do well, and when they don't, something's going on, right? And so kids also listen when they're feeling safe and connected. Connection activates what's called our social engagement system. It's our ventral vagal state. It's our most regulated optimal performance state, right? And that opens up the brain for a connection when they're in the social engagement system. So we want to engage that system. So some things we might do instead of yelling or punishing to get our child to listen is get down on their eye level, use a calm but firm tone, state what you want them to do and not just what you don't want them to do, right? Like I would never teach you to build cabinets, but give you instructions on everything you shouldn't do, right? So you want to give them the steps, and for each child, this could be different. Some children can only handle one step, one clear step at a time, right? instead of a long list of steps. You can offer limited choices. So that might look like when you're getting down on their level, talking in a firm but calm voice. We have to go brush our teeth. Do you want to do that right now? Or we can do it in 2 minutes, right? So we can offer a choice and let them choose. And actually, I would probably rephrase it instead of saying, do you want to do it now? I would probably say, we can do it now, or we can do it in 2 minutes. So it's a statement and not a question. And then I would say follow through with consistency, right? There is no need for harshness, but in the end, we need to be the leaders. We are the parents. Okay. The next question I have here is, what routines or tools can help save? Sorry, let me start that over. What routines or tools can help us save a smooth? I think that's supposed to be help us have. Okay, so what routines or tools can help us have a smoother bedtime? All right. So evenings are usually the hardest part of the day for a lot of families. It's because when we are tired, we are not in our optimal arousal brain, right? We are dipping down and we are losing regulation. So the ability to stay regulated for a child as they get tired is getting smaller and smaller. So predictability really helps the nervous system to feel safe. And so if we can have, and I'd urge all of us to have a specific bedtime routine. So, and I would keep it the same every night. It might be we do a bath, a story, a snuggle, lights out, right? Or whatever works for your family, right? It could, you might not do bath every night. So it could be a bathroom, right? Bathroom for brushing our teeth and using the potty, and then story time, snuggle, whatever, right? So you get the idea, but just keep it the same. Also, as the night gets closer to bedtime, we can have dimmer lights, have lower voices, do something that signals us and our children it is time to calm down. You could even use like a visual chart. I believe I have a visual chart on my free resources, and the link is already in the comment section. So you could just go onto my website, get that free resource, print out a routine chart, and you could put up little pictures of your bedtime routine. That could help. Sometimes when you add that like connection ritual before bedtime, that helps them to calm down. So, we're having 2 minutes of special cuddles, special whatever, special hug time, right? And the only other thing that I suggest that typically helps is minimizing screen time after dinner. So definitely at least an hour. If you could do 2 before bedtime, no screens for your children. So, all right. How do I set limits without being mean or giving in? Awesome. So, yeah, you want to set limits in a firm but kind way. So I love actually the circle of security, if you've ever heard of it. Their way to describe our role as parents as bigger, kinder, and wiser. So we are holding all of those at one time. And no one is taking over, because if we're just bigger, then we become mean, right? Like that comes across mean. If we're just kinder, that comes across as passive. So we want to hold them all together, so that we can set limits with our child that are important, and in a way where we stay regulated during that. So, really, limits create safety in our child's brain. And our kids' brains, along with adult brains, need to be organized, and need that structure to regulate themselves. So, if they don't have it, they become dysregulated. So some things I would say to do to set limits is use a calm, clear, and kind voice, right? I won't let you hit me. I'm going to help everyone in this house feel safe, right? You want to hold the boundary. And we can do that with empathy, right? You might say something like, I know you're upset that this isn't going your way. You cannot hit me, right? And just remember that consistency is really kindness. So we want to make sure we are setting limits in a consistent way. We don't want to set a limit and then go back on that, right? Like, no, you cannot do X, Y, and Z. And then 5 minutes later, you're allowing them to do whatever it was that you said no. So be consistent, but do that in a regulated, clear way. All right. That looks like all the questions I got. I am just going to check again to see if any more questions came in. And that's it. So I really appreciate everyone joining me. One kind of takeaway that I want to remind everybody of is that you don't have to always have the perfect response. Okay, so this is not about following this specific formula and saying this specific thing. It's not about fixing all the behavior of your children or child, but about understanding what really lies behind the behavior and responding with connection first so that they know they're safe. Also, allowing the emotions to happen. I think a lot of times as parents, we want to fix that emotion or take it away. But understanding that the emotion that is coming up with our children is okay. The behavior might not be, right? They can get angry. They're not to hit me, right? So there's a difference. And we can hold space for both truths, right? So you're really angry. Mom isn't going to go away just because you're angry. But sitting in that moment of that feeling allows you as the parent to get used to these uncomfortable feelings. And most importantly, allows your child to get used to these uncomfortable feelings. So I would say that is one of the biggest things I could give you tonight is it is okay to feel our emotions and sit in those emotions before moving to fix them right away. All right. Well, I really appreciate your time. Please head over to my website at abrighterfuturecounseling.com. And there you can navigate to my newsletter and get my free tantrum response roadmap. Or you can navigate to my free resource area and pick out what resources might be helpful for you as you navigate parenthood. Keep a lookout for all my YouTube videos coming up. And go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel. Also, keep an eye out for another live Q&A coming up. I will be doing one in another couple months and would love more thoughtful questions that you guys had. Thank you guys so much.